Okay, hey, are we live?
Yes, we're live.
Okay, right. Welcome, everybody. It is great to be back at Nickle at Noon. We've missed you all. It's been a year of, well, just a crazy year. We hoped when we started online Nickle at Noons a year ago that we would be back in person, but alas, here we are again virtually, and we're thrilled to have you here today. I'd like to begin with the land acknowledgement. Marla, I hope you have the right screen up. We'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot, comprising the Siksika, Piikani, the Kainai, and Tsuut'ina First Nations, as well as the Stoney Nakoda, the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley First Nations. The city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3, and it's with gratitude that we share this space and hopefully are walking a good path together. It is great to have you here. We're coming to you live from the Founders Gallery, so hopefully we won't have any technical issues. Oh, Marta, can you advance to the second slide, please? This is Nickle at Noon. I hope you're all in the right spot. Of course, every Thursday from 12 to 1 throughout the term, we'll be bringing you different talks, tours, workshops, no dances this year, but you never know. Something virtually every Thursday to look forward to. We are planning to proceed with Zoom events this term. In January, we'll just have to see where we are. Hopefully we're out of COVID by then, who knows. So every Thursday, Marla, the next slide, please. Just a reminder, a few housekeeping tips. We would very kindly ask you to leave your mics off, leave your cameras off, and if you have any questions, if you could put them in the chat. And there's good reasons for us for this request. It's not quite as personal, I know, but it's the best that we can do with this particular format. Next slide, please. That should be the last one with the introductions. I'm Michele Hardy. I'll talk a little bit more about me in a moment. Marla Halstad is working the magic of Zoom behind the scenes, and it's really with gratitude that she's doing this. I'll also point out that Nickle preparator John Hales is manning the camera today, and we have a special guest that I'll introduce in just a moment. This week, of course, we're giving you a virtual tour, but next week will be a more traditional lecture, and I don't have the title in front of me, but it's by art historian John Weller about Colin Campbell, an early video artist. It should be a really interesting presentation. And the last slide, Marla, if you can, is again just the title of today's presentation. We're doing a virtual tour of Tensile Strength, Weavers in War, live from the Military Museum's Founders Gallery at the Military Museums. Always a bit of a technical challenge, but we will do our best. And at this juncture,
we're going to pause you for a sec.
Yep.
I need this camera. Okay. Go ahead.
At this juncture, I'm just going to introduce Kawa Aahangar, who is volunteered here at the Military Museum. And Kawa has very kindly agreed to join me in the tour and to lend his Afghan expertise to the proceedings. He's a recent immigrant to Canada, and I'm just so happy that you're here and that your family in Canada are safe. Of course, we offer this tour in full knowledge of what's going on in Afghanistan, and our hearts just grieve, and it's just such an unbelievable situation in Afghanistan. We certainly pray for the people that are still there. Kawa is a graduate of the Faculty of Political Science from Kawa University. He started his career as a journalist working with various media organizations. He's worked as a public outreach advisor for the Elections Commission in Afghanistan and has worked in civil society with political parties and free media, strengthening projects in Afghanistan for 2 decades. So it's with considerable expertise and insight that he's joining us here today. Myself, I am a curator with Nickle Galleries. If you've joined us before, my face is really familiar. I don't know what that means, Marla. Are we good? Can you lower? Oh, we have an echo. Okay, sure. I'm a textile expert and an anthropologist. I teach courses in museum and heritage studies, and I get to care for the Nickle's really wonderful textile collection. A little information about the context of this particular exhibition, and John, if you can swing around and just maybe shoot the other end of the gallery. This exhibition came about really because of what you're seeing now. This is a project spearheaded by Rory Corey and the Department of National Defense called Mission Afghanistan. It is also in the Founders Gallery at the military museums. And it really chronicles the involvement of Canadian troops in Afghanistan during the recent conflicts. If you haven't seen it, I would encourage you to come out and see it. It should be on most of the fall. And so complementing that exhibition, I was asked to put together a selection of war carpets from the Nichols collections. These are carpets that were woven by Afghans from the period about 1980 to probably about 2005, and really react to the various conflicts that have been going on in Afghanistan. And what Kawa and I would like to do is we're going to go back and forth a little bit, and maybe he's the best person to talk about carpet making in Afghanistan and a little bit about the history of carpet making in Afghanistan.
Thanks so much, Michele. Hello, everyone. Carpet making in Afghanistan has a very long history for centuries and millennia. Mostly nomad groups who were living on these flat, wide areas of North Afghanistan, south of Central Asia. They were the people who started the first carpets to weave. These nomad groups has different patterns and types for their carpets, for the racks to weave. Mainly, it has few basic elements that, since this course of history, all of them were using this basic designs or sketch. If you can please focus on this rack. As you see in this rack, we have some lines which represents borders. We have these two shapes. We have the central field here, and we have some war racks elements, which is the military airplanes here. So in this rack is like 80% matching with the traditional design of racks. We have only a few objects of war racks here, like some guns and the airplanes. So generally, nomad groups, when they put these shapes, which is mostly round or square, these shapes represents their tents. This central field represents their motherland, the land that they are allowed or they have and they can live there. These borders represents the border of their territory. So they shouldn't cross this. Of course, they can always travel through these borders, but they couldn't go and put their tents there, or they couldn't take their animals or hunt there. So these nomad groups, as they were always forced to move from one land to another land, but they always had on their mind the nostalgia of their motherland. So just as we like to have the map of our country and the wall of our rooms, they love to have these racks to remember always their motherlands, their tents, the lands that they always dream to go back, and the legends and the histories of all these nomad groups. We see in the poetries of these nomad groups, we always see the love of their motherland, and they want to go back there. So this is how the basic sketch or illustrations of these racks appear. But of course, when it's imaged to all racks, we have some different elements. Some of them still use the basic tradition and sketch of the racks, but they replace the shapes and the with the war elements. But we have some which is totally destroyed or totally forgot about the traditional design of the racks and became with a very new ideas, which I call them the revolutionary war racks.
That's great, Kawa. Thank you so much. I have to say that spending time with Kawa and looking at these rugs, although I've looked at them many, many times, but looking at them with Kawa and his expertise is just blowing my mind. So thank you, Kawa. When did war rugs evolve? Probably in the earliest ones date from about 1979, when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan. They arrived, well, many places, but including areas close to Herat. And in fact, two of the earliest rugs in this exhibition date from that earliest period. This kind of rug, for example, dates to about 1979, 1980. And although it's very different than the rug Kawa was just showing you, it is still a relatively traditional rug. You'll notice that the center is filled with helicopters and tanks and all sorts of little floral motifs, repeated and repeated and repeated down the length of the carpet. It's flanked on either side with Kalashnikovs, decorated with bullets in this case. And of course, surrounding the outer edge of the carpet isn't a beautiful decorative border similar to the one we've just seen, but actually a border made out of rows and rows of bullets. So the format is still relatively traditional, but the subject matter is revolutionary. Something has really shifted in people's minds. What prompted weavers to begin to experiment in this way? We don't really know. Maybe it was the opportunity of, a new audience, creating new kinds of souvenirs. Maybe it was catharsis. Maybe it was a form of resistance. We don't really know. But these are really interesting artifacts. They're wonderful to sort of think through. I'll point out another very early rug in the opposite corner there, John. This is another very early one. It dates again to the early 80s. And one of the reasons we know that it's early, for one thing, and you can't do this, sorry, maybe if you come and visit me at the Nickle, is it has a very, very floppy feel. The wool is super silky. I almost said super sexy. No, I didn't mean that. It's super silky. It has a wonderful sheen that you probably can't see in this light. These salvages, these edges on the sides, are probably woven with goat hair, which I've been told, you can dispute this, Kawa, you might have something to say about this. The goat hair helps to keep the snakes off of the carpet. Have you ever heard that?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's heard that. Okay, so I didn't make it up. Again, we have a border going all the way around, and this is a border featuring Soviet tanks and military vehicles. In the center, there are more helicopters and aircraft. And in the very center, and I hope you can make this out, are much more traditional motifs, very similar to carpet designs woven across Asia. And right here, a mihrab. This is a prayer rug, ladies and gentlemen. And although I thought this was an exceptional artifact, Kawa has said that no, actually members of the Mujahideen in Afghanistan would probably pray on something like this. They would lay down their weapons and use this to perform their namaz, their prayer, if they're particularly devout 5 times a day. So very early rug. Come and visit me at the Nickle and I'll let you feel it. Kawa, would you like to talk about these 3 remarkable rugs on the far wall?
Thanks so much. Just before to go into these details of these 3 racks, I should have mentioned that the weavers of these racks, just like the writers, just like the artists, just like the filmmakers, just like the historians, they wanted to express themselves. They want to have their point of view to tell us something. It is not just they put these elements randomly here and trying to find the best market for them. No, when you see the details of this rack, you can get the message. The message that most of them are not allowed to see it clearly because, for example, this rack is woven in a refugee camp in Pakistan. It's written here. So the guys or the women, mostly it's women who are weaving the racks, they couldn't express themselves clearly. They tried some other ways, different ways to tell us, to convey their message. In this rack, if you can please, John, zoom here, we have, of course, there is a guns and map of Afghanistan, the guns pointing to Afghanistan, but here we have a track, which is a military track. Taliban used for the first time this kind of track in Afghanistan as a military track, and they installed actually. It doesn't have original weapons on it, so they installed the weapon on it. But we have this number here, 420, 2 times it's repeated. So this 420 is a very famous number in Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, 420 means it's a number for thieves. It's a number for those people who are trying to steal things from others. And when the weaver of this rack put this number here, she tried to tell us that Taliban are thieves. It's not just a random number from a card.
What was, sorry to interrupt, Kawa, what was the name of that number in Dari?
In Dari, we call it Dost or Kisabor.
Right.
Dost Kisabor.
And it meant the same thing to my partner who's Indian. And it sounds like a frenemy. The number kind of suggests a frenemy.
In Hindi, they call it 420.
420. That's
420.
Yeah.
What I heard about 420 or 420, that is the number of the criminal law of India, the article of the criminal law of India, which is talking about the punishments of thieves.
That's amazing.
So that's why this number became famous for all thieves, and I'm sure it came from India to Afghanistan. So the lady who waved this rack, she put this number, and she was super smart girl, super smart woman, just like an artist, trying to say that Taliban are thieves. And I'm glad I had the opportunity to explain this. Yeah. So in this rack, we have the map of Afghanistan, the center, guns pointing to Afghanistan from all directions, which want to tell us that all neighbors of Afghanistan, north, south, east, west, all of them are trying to make a problem for Afghanistan, or trying to invade Afghanistan, which is true. During the past 4 decades, we have always a problem with our neighbors. The interesting thing about this rack is we don't have a single element of the traditional rack here. We have somehow the traditional elements of racks in most of these carpets in the gallery, but this one doesn't have the borders, doesn't have the central feet.
The weaver completely destroyed, get out of the traditional way of making the racks and made a very revolutionary rack with the very bright background, and this object is completely something totally new. Sure.
I think we should just take a moment. And we can't not look at, with the anniversary coming, we can't not look at the famous 9/11 rug. And this was one of the earliest war rugs that came to our collection, not the first one that was made, of course. It was probably made maybe in 2001, but certainly following the events of 9/11. And what we have on this carpet are the two twin towers. You can see the airplanes, 1 and 2, just before they're hitting the buildings. There are helicopters in the sky. There's a map of Afghanistan behind. In front is the twinned flags of Afghanistan and the US with the dove of peace. Down the bottom here is probably the USS Nimitz. It was in the Persian Gulf at the time of all of this, and firing a Tomahawk missile at Afghanistan. So it's all of the horrible, horrific events that were happening on or around September the 11th in 2001 that are encapsulated in this one carpet. And I think for many people, when they think of war rugs, this is the kind of thing that they think of, or that they think about carpets with all of these guns and bombs woven into them. And certainly we have lots of those, but there are many others that tell a slightly different story. We're going to move just over to your left there, John. And talk about this character. We have in our collection, war rugs became sort of typified. And that's going to be a point that we come back to at the end of the tour. But this is a rug that we actually have about 6 different iterations of. This particular one, again, we have the map of Afghanistan. It's kind of wonky, but it's a map. We have Iran over here. We have China. It's spelt wrong, but there it is. We have Pakistan looking kind of peaceful and pastoral. And in fact, on all 6 of the rugs that we have, there's always growing things over here and, you know, kind of scenes of violence and despair over here. Soviet is at the top. Soviet Russia is at the top with, of course, it's red. There is the coat of arms. And I hope you can see this, I'm on the wrong side, this hand. Do you see the hand coming down from Russia? There's a fingernail, fingernail, fingernail. There's a hammer and sickle holding the head of this guy who has another hammer and sickle on his forehead. This is the infamous president of Afghanistan, Najibullah. He was left by the Soviets when they pulled out of Afghanistan in 1989. He was detested by, well, pretty much everybody in Afghanistan, and eventually took refuge in the compound of the UN, was rooted by the Taliban and brutally hung and murdered in the streets of Kabul. In, what was the date of his death? I've forgotten.
It was on October 1995.
1995. Thank you. Thank you.
And these are Taliban's.
And these are Taliban soldiers.
Oh,
Where are
okay.
the guns all facing? They're all facing him. These are grenades. This is not R2-D2, although I often joke with children about that. I'm not sure what that is. But the contrast between what's happening here and what's happening here is really dramatic. So rugs typified, we'll come back to that point. So in this first room in the exhibition, we've presented some perhaps the more well-known carpets. In the second room, we explore some different themes, and we will, when John's ready, walk you over there. And I should just remind everybody that we're looking at handmade artifacts. Everything in this exhibition is made by hand by somebody. An Afghan person, could have been a woman. Traditionally, it would have been a woman, but through the conflicts, often other people would weave in refugee camps as a way to make a living. People do what they have to do to survive these kinds of situations, of course. Afghan refugees were in both Pakistan and in Iran. And in fact, that first carpet that Kawa was speaking to was woven by an Afghan family, but woven probably near Mashhad in Iran. So we talked about rugs that depict weaponry and scenes of horrific chaos. But war rugs also encompass rugs that express some different sentiments. And we wanted to show some of those in this section of the exhibition. And one of the first that we're going to begin with is this wonderful rug woven, by in the vicinity of Herat. Kawa, can you see the date for this one? 1995, thank you. Is quite a large rug.
Actually, this one is 2000.
2000, quite a large rug. They do become smaller throughout the period. But what's interesting about this rug is in the background, we have the very famous Huracan Citadel, which is an archaeological site. In fact, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, now protected by that program. It houses a couple of museums and I think, is there still a residence there?
No, there is no residence there, but around the citadel, there is a big community living with these traditional houses lasted from like centuries ago, which is that all that part is UNESCO Heritage Center. We have really, very beautiful museum inside this citadel. I've been many times there. I love that. But unfortunately now Taliban are there and I don't know what UNESCO is going to do for that.
Yeah, scary. It was built in about the time of Alexander the Great, although it's been rebuilt many times. It is a very famous landmark in Herat. Now, I'll just point out that below that is not a Toyota, but it's actually a Nissan Frontier, another one of those tanks sort of used by guerrilla armies around the world. In this case, probably the Taliban. There's the keys. There's some other military vehicles here. If you can make out the inscription, it's a bit garbled, but frontier, most important cargo. And again, these Nissans and Toyotas, this talk is not sponsored by them. They are often used by guerrilla armies because they're cheaper, they're maneuverable, and you have a point you're going to make.
Yeah. I think this car, because it has this green, red, and dark blue, which could be black colors, and this is the color of the flag of Afghanistan. Taliban's flag is white with the black text written on it. So this could be one of the military track of government of Afghanistan, the fallen government. So
maybe protecting what we're seeing above that.
this citadel used as a military base for many years, and that's why during the war it was destroyed. And then when UNESCO, with the support of the Aga Khan Foundation, rebuilt the citadel, then they said it shouldn't be anymore as a military base. This was the condition. But now Taliban are inside and it's like another military base again. It's so beautiful.
Oh, you're on a roll. Do you want to talk about the John minaret?
So in this track, we have the minaret of John. This is the minaret. The minaret of John is one of the oldest minarets in the world. It's like for 900 years. This minaret has lasted there. The dynasty who built the minaret of Jam, when they invaded India, they went to India and they built the Qutb Minar in India, which is very famous. So if you couldn't go to Afghanistan, but if you could go to India, go and visit Qutb Minar there and make sure that the sister of Qutb Minar is in central Afghanistan. War province is a province located at the center of Afghanistan. It's in the very highlands, mountains. As you see there, we have a river just beside the minaret. Minaret of Jam is also part of the UNESCO heritage, and there was some protections projects to protect the minaret because it was a little bit like not very strong and steady. So yeah, it's a beautiful. I haven't been, unfortunately. I haven't had a chance to be there, but yes, I love this.
I have been to the Qutb Minar Delhi.
Yeah,
Long time.
So it's the
Yeah, it's
sister of
beautiful,
the.
beautiful.
Yeah.
So from these two archaeological sites, I'll get John to turn around 180 degrees. We have two other versions of Herat city, and from maybe a celebration of this deep, deep history to scenes of busy, modern, bustling, modern life in Herat. And with Kawa's help, we have confirmed that this very odd kind of structure is in fact, a tower in Herat. It's part of a traffic circle. It is not sort of the same size as a skyscraper, but it is a large monument. The actual monument doesn't have a clock, but actually has a book with hands. And I think we speculated whether it was the Quran, and that perhaps the weaver chose to replace that with a clock because to walk on even a woven image of the Quran would be disrespectful. So here is Herat, not as an archaic city necessarily, but a busy modern city. And this rug just to my left, similarly, it's skewed sideways, but there's the tower, there's the clock, and another version of a very busy modern city. So I'd like to think that there's some civic pride and a desire to show Afghanistan not as a country that is always at war, not as a country that is stuck in the past or many of the negative stereotypes that we hear on the media, but modern and thriving and maybe a waxing optimistic.
Just that one thing.
Yeah, please.
This monument, as we see the shape, represents the number of 8 in our numbers. In Farsi numbers, this is 8. It's written like this. And 8 is the 8th day of the second month of our local calendar, is the day of the Mujahideen's victory over the Russian army and the communist government we had. So on 1992, which is matching to 27th of April. So 27th April 1992 was the day that Kabul was captured by Mujahideen and the communist regime, which was Najibullah was the leader, collapsed. So this monument was built in Herat city to honor the victory of Mujahideen. And this shape represents 8.
Thank you, Kawa. That insight, and again, I've looked at lots and lots of examples of rugs like this, mainly online, of course, art, but that has never been shared. So we're all learning something new here today. Let's go to Ahmad Shah Massoud. Speaking of the Mujahideen, maybe John, you can just. This is such a great rug, and this is such a fantastic story on so many different levels. But Kawa, I'm going to let you introduce this figure.
So Ahmad Shah Massoud, late Ahmad Shah Massoud, was the leader of Mujahideen, one of very famous commanders of Mujahideen in Afghanistan. He fought against Russian army. At least 9 times Russian army invaded to his territory, which was north and northeast of Afghanistan, but they couldn't succeed. People in Afghanistan and some other peoples comparing him with great military leaders of the history and guerrilla leaders like Ernesto de la Serna Che Guevara or even Alexander the Great, a guy who wrote the military history of Afghanistan, wrote military history of Afghanistan from Alexander the Great to Ahmad Shah Massoud. So he is comparing with them. He was later after, he was killed actually by Al-Qaeda terrorist who was posing as journalist and teaching him as journalist.
20 years today.
20 years today, exactly. Yes, thank you so much about that. Yes, exactly 20 years today. He was killed in north of Afghanistan by 2 Arab Al-Qaeda terrorists, and it was just 2 days before the 9/11.
So we've shown this collection in a few different iterations. And in previous iterations, this was one of the few rugs that was really of interest to local Afghan people. And it's really because of Ahmad Shah Massoud. His son, Ahmed Massoud, is now the leader of the resistance to the Taliban forces. This carpet has a number of inscriptions on it in both the Dari and Pashto, and they're really quite interesting. One of the lines is a memorial carpet, but one of the lines is actually a telephone number. And Robert Fike, who donated these collections, and I'll introduce him in a moment, Robert Fike phoned that number and scared a family in Iran to pieces, but eventually learned that a family of Afghan carpet weavers had moved to this house in Iran, had woven carpets, but had since returned to Afghanistan and had woven their telephone number. I don't know if it's this line or this line, but had woven their telephone number into the rug. Well, that's the only carpet in our collection with a phone number. So there's 3 different portraits of Massoud on this carpet. Here he is at the top with his hand on his chin, looking very pensive. He was a scholar. He was a great reader. This, thanks to Kawa's investigative mind, this is from a very famous image of him. And this image down here is another very famous image of Massoud, sitting with his arms behind his back. There's his arms. And I speculated for a long time that he was about to do his namaz, but I've been corrected. So a really interesting rug. Just to the right of this rug is actually a scene from the Panjshir Valley. This is where Massoud was born. This is the area that he defended successfully from the Taliban, and first from the Soviets. Now his son is defending it from the Taliban. It's a very mountainous area, lots of caves. It's very difficult terrain to I guess, invade and protect. But here we are looking up the valley, various sites, some of which are named, and at the top there, this is the tomb of Ahmad Shah Massoud. So we know that this carpet dates from after his death 20 years ago. So an interesting one for sure. We will spin around, John, and we will look at Huracan. So one of the things that we try to do in this particular room is bring in some different stories, some different perspectives, that not all contemporary Afghan rugs were about guns, but often about recovering a history and recovering past historical figures. Huracan was really kind of an interesting figure to be recovered at this moment. He was president of Afghanistan. King of Afghanistan. Thank you.
From 1919 to 1929.
History is not my strong suit. Contemporary with a number of other progressive leaders at the time. He was not particularly popular, but he assumed the kingship of Afghanistan at a time when the British and the Russians were battling what was called the Great Game. They were battling for control over Afghanistan. And Amanullah Khan managed to wrest power from both of them and crown himself king. He was contemporary with Ataturk and likely other, again, progressive leaders. Here he is in more or less Western military dress. This is probably from a famous portrait painted of him. You know, it's a bit funny. He's got a really fabulous mustache. But the stance and the view is quite confronting. And he's an interesting figure. I think that maybe he's been recovered. This figure from 1925 is being recovered today because of his strength at standing up to an enemy. Here is another depiction of Amanullah Khan surrounded by military vehicles. I don't know why the birds are upside down. There are many questions with these carpets. Any thoughts?
I just want to say about this one. As Michele explained, Amanullah Khan was a king that tried to bring modernization to Afghanistan. So during his time, the first time girls were allowed to go to the school. He was the king who ended up the slavery in Afghanistan. And of course, he had many ideas about having media in Afghanistan, electricity, and other elements of civilization. So that is why we see in this rack, the weavers make kind of happier. We have everywhere flowers, animals, birds, and Amanullah Khan also looks very happy in his royal dress or his king's uniform. So it means that people like this area. They were trying to, the weavers were trying to say that that was like a golden area for Afghanistan, which was lasted only 10 years, unfortunately.
Maybe a missed opportunity.
Missed opportunity like the last 20 years. So that was another missed opportunity. Unfortunately, yes.
We're almost there, folks. We've got 3 more rugs to talk about. And actually this one, John, maybe you could just shoot it up from the bottom. I'm not going to say too much about it. We do encourage you to come to the Founders Gallery. The exhibition is open and will be up probably most of the fall. You'll have to wear masks, obviously, but we've got quite extensive labels. Some of the labels actually have photographs, so that Huracan monument, there's a photograph of the monument so you can compare, contrast. This is an interesting carpet that I chose to include because it shows a number of named sites, including way at the top here, a scene of Aahangar gardens, which were built by Amanullah Khan. So again, they're dating from about the 20s, a Western style garden for relaxation, for picnicking. I think it's not far from Kabul.
No, it's just like 30 minutes drive. And this building was copied of, what is that big buildings on Paris, Champs-Élysées? So it's a copy of that.
The Champs-Élysées.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody on Zoom is answering that question. It's not coming to me right now. I love this camel. Yeah. Although he's kind of pained looking. But yeah, like really interesting. Now, the last time I checked on the internet, this was still standing.
Yeah, it's
but
still
everything else was decimated.
Yeah, it's still standing. And this was the main place that every year, the king with the other royal family and courts and people were getting together there to celebrate the victory of Afghanistan from the British Empire.
Right. So a great carpet, and it has been shown actually in this space once before, but it's got a huge story. This has been such a delight to learn about this particular carpet. Again, we've had it for a while, but I hadn't had a chance to really probe the story behind the story. But you know that story.
Yes, and I love to talk like for hours about this history.
You've got 2 minutes.
Yeah, I know, unfortunately, so I'm trying to make it short. So in this rack, we have different scenes of one battle. This was a battle of one of our legendary hero with a dragon. This legendary hero's name is Rustam. Rustam actually in Afghanistan, Tajikistan, and Iran, and like all Farsi speaking people, Rustam is a legendary hero, just like Hercules of Greek. So as Hercules had 9 tasks to accomplish to become the superhero, Rustam had 7 tasks. And this rack represents the 3rd task of Rustam. He's killing a dragon. The story of Rustam is written in a book called Sharma, Book of Kings, which is all in poem. And Ferdowsi, who was the poet of this book, lived like 1100 years ago. The details of this rack is very interesting. First of all, what we see Rustam is wearing, it looks like a crown, but it's not crown because he was never a king to wear a crown. He had a helmet which was made by the skeleton of a giant which had 2 horns. So that when he was killing this dragon, he doesn't have yet that helmet because the killing of that white giant was his last task, which was the 7th task. So when he killed it, he cut the head and then he made his helmet of his skeleton. The bird we have here, this bird represents the legendary bird Phoenix. Phoenix was the bird who was protecting his father and him and actually his family. So we have Phoenix here, we have the bird here, and we have there. This is his horse, and that task, his horse actually helped him to kill the dragon. And the interesting thing is that although this is talking about a very long study, it's a mythology, but we have helicopters here. So we have here helicopters, here, there, and over there. So the weaver trying to connect past and present mythology with the history, and it's something that completely rare. I never seen such racks with like this mythology and new elements. Around the rack we have caravan of camels. Camels were very famous in Afghanistan and Central Asia during the Silk Road trades. We had specific types of camels called Bactrian camels. They were very strong. They were a little bit shorter than the Arabian camels, but like even 2 times stronger than them. This represents the Silk Road. Then we have the hero at the center feet. And the story about the hip.
That's just amazing. And for any Ruggies that are watching, I'll just point out that the camels, each of the camels has this decorative device on the side, and I'm inclined to think that they are adorned with what are known in other parts of Central Asia as asmalek. And it is basically a triangular shaped carpet that is used to
They put it on both sides of camels, horses, donkeys, so they can put there are things there, and then they can write.
Yeah, it's just amazing that they've included past and present. And one of the reasons why I wanted to include this carpet here was again to allude to this very long, very distinguished history, and the fact that Afghanistan has been connected with other countries.
Yes.
You know, often in the West, we don't understand that Afghanistan is part of the Persian Empire, and that there's very, very strong cultural and linguistic ties.
For many centuries, there was a big empire on that region. Sometimes the center or the capital of the region was in Balkh city, which is north of Afghanistan, or in Iran, Pasargad, which is or Takht Jamshid, they call it. They were there, or sometime in Ghazni city, Herat city, Ghazni, Herat, or the center of Afghanistan, Bukhara and Samarkand, which is on the other side of the Oxus River, currently in Uzbekistan. So they were the main cities and political centers of the region. Kings were sitting there, or sometimes they had their summer capital and their winter capital. They were moving, for example, Koshans were ruling Afghanistan 2 centuries before BC. They had their summer capital in around close to Kabul, Bakram, and their winter capital was the Peshawar city, which is currently in Pakistan.
For any of the travelers out there, let's go.
Yeah, if the situation allows.
Yeah, no,
Now even I can.
No. We have one last carpet, and it's in a little bit awkward position. At some point, I'm going to talk, and then maybe you can just show this little graphic as well. So I didn't talk about how this material ended up at Nickle Galleries. Everything in this exhibition, and in fact, there are many more back at the museum, were donated by 2 different gentlemen. One is Max Allen, who has a long association with the Textile Museum of Canada. He donated about 12 rugs to us, and we're very thankful for that. The bulk of the collection actually came from Robert Fike. And Rob was a great friend, a textile enthusiast, and an early collector of this material in Calgary. I think Rob was probably collecting before anybody else in Calgary anyway. But early on in his collecting career, he'd seen a rug and couldn't find it anywhere. He couldn't find it to purchase and add to his collection. And it was a rug called the Loya Jirga. It was a rug that we managed to borrow for an exhibition that we had in 2006. And John's going to show you the actual rug in just a second. So Rob, being Rob, wrote to his friend in Pakistan and said, I would really like, this Loya Jirga carpet for my collection. And so he kind of thought that by describing it and providing a thumbnail sketch, can you zoom in on that? There's the original. There's the sketch. Rob hoped that he would get back this. Well, what he got back was that. This funny, wonky, crazy rug. And he didn't just get back one. No, there were many because he had to order in some great number. But what's interesting about this rug, other than the Rob crazy story, was, again, we have the map of Afghanistan, really wonky here, and sitting around the table are representatives from across the country in the rug, the original rug that we had seen. Each of those individuals is actually wearing ethnic dress. So you can see their differences reflected in their costume. There were also men and women at that Loya Jirga, coming together to decide on the constitution of Afghanistan. So if you come to the show and you wonder why is this crazy rug here? That's the story behind the rug. And in fact, Rob made the quip that, if he understood that he was designing a rug, he would have taken more than 30 seconds to design a rug. So it is such a pleasure to to go through this exhibition with my colleagues from the Nickle. And Kawa, thank you so much. Your insights are just, you're just blowing my mind. I've learned so much, and I hope that people will come see the exhibition and meet you because you're here regularly.
And if they come to see the exhibition, Mondays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, morning time, I'm here.
He's here, and you want to talk to Kawa. This exhibition should be up through the fall. The dates are still sort of being determined, but we would love to see you here, and would love to see you at Nickle at Noon's coming up. And if there are any questions, Marla, in the chat. Yes, she says there's a few questions. No, there's no questions. This is your moment, folks. If you have a question.
Once again, Kawa has been a phenomenal asset with extensive personal knowledge, and kudos once again to you, Michele. Brilliant. That's from Linda.
Of course, it's from Linda. Thank you, Linda. We love you too.
Keep them coming, guys.
Yeah, I appreciate that this is a different format, and you know, again, new technology. This is the only virtual tour we're going to do this term, but they get better and better. A year ago, we crashed and burned, but we persevered and made it work. So, well, if there's nothing coming in, you're welcome to reach out to either one of us. You know where I am at the Nickle. Kawa is here. Dick Averns is the curatorial coordinator here at Founders. He's always happy to answer questions about what's coming up or even this material. And we look forward to seeing you next week on a wonderful presentation by John Weller on the early video artist Colin Camp. So,
Just lots of thank yous. And that's
Pleasure.
about all I have coming in.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye for now.